Well, for everyone who's joined, I just want to I want to introduce Valena. She has an amazing book out called Pink Crime. You can find it all over the place. It's a really good book. And I would say it's groundbreaking, right? Like it actually you coined the term pink crime. We're going to talk about what that means, but you really do uncover how the legal system weaponizes queer identity, women's lives, every part of their life, alternative families, and also fabricates guilt and criminalizes queer love.
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
so I just want to thank you for joining me. I heard you speak earlier this summer, and I reached out and said, "Hey, I want to talk," and I'm glad that we were able to do this.
Yeah, and I love the Queer Love Project, so this
Oh,
is
thank you.
a joy for me.
So first, let's talk about pink crime. You describe it as how women and queer people often face wrongful convictions for crimes that never occurred, and this idea of like a sort of no crime phenomenon. Could you, for people who haven't read it or haven't heard this term, just kind of tell us in a nutshell like how you think of pink crime?
Yeah, so pink crime is trying to create a label for these prosecutions that are really based on gender, gender identity, gender expression. And I think there's real power in connecting those cases. So just last week, John Oliver on Last Week Tonight had a whole show on fetal personhood and charges against pregnant people that are connected to gender, gender conformity. Those same cases and those same holdings by judges can be used in cases where charges are brought against queer people for their queer identity, for gender expression.
Right.
So the book really connects those dots. And in terms of no crime, wrongful convictions, that's my starting point. So I'm a wrongful convictions litigator, have been for years. I'm on the board with the Indiana Innocence Project.
Yes.
And so I've litigated these cases. I have clients who have been wrongly convicted where no crime occurred. And people hear that and they're like, what? What can that possibly mean?
Yeah.
So I'll give an example that's a real example of someone who I work with at the Indiana Innocence Project, Christy Bunch, in Indiana. And it's middle of the night and a fire starts in her home and she tries to get to her child through the fire. She can't. She runs outside. She takes like a tricycle to break the window of her child's bedroom to try to get in that way. She can't. And her child, her young son, tragically dies.
Oh my gosh.
I know, she's taken to the hospital. She has her own injuries, and police see her not as a victim, but as a suspect. That
Yeah.
she, as a single mom, as a working class mom, that she started this, that she didn't want to be a mom. She wanted to kill her child. And the police
Right.
interrogate her right there at the hospital while she's being treated. And she's ultimately charged and convicted based on bogus fire science evidence, where some state experts say this had to have been arson, this had to have been intentionally set, and all the gender tropes leading to her wrongful conviction. But actually, it was a problem with the furnace. It was actually an
Hmm.
accidental fire that started, and she was able to prove that after more than 10 years in prison. She was able to prove that.
Wow.
So that's an example where there was no criminal act. There was just a tragic accident. Think of dryers, think of space heaters.
Hmm.
There's just an electrical fire, there's a tragic accident, and instead a woman is charged because of her gender identity and convicted. So
And
she,
and I don't want us to go down that route, but obviously there's a very high profile case right now that they're working on getting the jury for. Is also dealing with a mother who did kill her children
yeah.
and it admits that she did. So we do have those cases. So this is not that no crime, meaning like it could have been an accident. Somebody could have called
Mhm.
somebody on their friend or neighbor because they don't like gay
Mhm.
people, or whatever it
Yep.
is.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. So if we're thinking about gay folks, we can think of the recent Pete Buttigieg complaint that came through Indiana, where someone called the Indiana social workers and state police and said Pete Buttigieg abuses children and should be separated from his own kids. And guess what? They didn't even look into the complaint. The
Yeah.
police just went to his home and separated him from his children.
Yeah. And if you've never had to deal with child protective services or the legal system, you might not believe these things. But I've unfortunately, in my personal life, dealt with them when I was a kid and also as an adult. So I know that these things can be quite scary when you're involved as well, because you're like, "What the hell's going on? I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not a bad person," and yet somebody did something or called somebody or whatever. Yeah,
Right, and people often talk to the police because they're like, "Let me explain what's going on. Here's the truth of what's going on." But police generally, when they wanna talk to you, they're you are at risk that they are seeing you as a suspect, and if you know they see you as a suspect, then they're going to use your words and turn it into some sort of a confession. So, do not talk to the police is what I always
yeah,
say, because your
yeah.
words will be twisted.
Yes, we hopefully have learned that from all of our TV shows and movies to protect your rights.
Yeah,
Um,
it's amazing how many folks still talk to the police.
yeah. Well, yeah, because you think, "Oh, I didn't do anything wrong."
Right.
Um, so you just mentioned this case with Pete and the way, queer parenting can be weaponized. Um, I mean, you're practicing in Indiana, and I wonder if you feel like there are certain ways that things are different in the Midwest or in certain regions versus is this a nationwide thing? Is it happening everywhere?
Uh, it's happening far more in states like my own, where gender affirming care for youth is absolutely illegal.
Right.
So if there are families who are trying to get care for a child and are going out of state for that, that can be used as a child abuse
Right.
allegation. We've seen that specifically happen in Texas. So
Yes.
that's a concern. Um, and yeah, so I think that in certain states I also think we have greater pregnancy criminalization, so going against parents again on those charges in states where abortion is illegal. Indiana is also one of those. So, yes, I think it is far, more of a risk in states like my own in Indiana that Child Protective Services is going to be weaponized, against folks like me.
So you're doing this important work, and I before we move on to the other questions, I am curious how you protect yourself, like as an innocence litigator, as a mother, as a queer woman with children. Like, how do you protect your own heart and like maintain your joy and your your? I don't know. How do you do this? I'm always curious.
Yeah, well, I guess there's 2 answers to this. So the question around joy really goes back to, again, the back door and community, and we have a really strong queer community here in Bloomington, and that matters, like, day in, day out. Uh, and in terms of, like, practically how we protect ourselves, so I'm married to, a woman, cisgender woman, and we have a child together, and we worry about this. Like,
Yeah.
we worry that, certain if we're late to pick up our kid from daycare, like, could that be a flag against us as queer parents? We don't take any, and we didn't when she was a baby, now a toddler, any nude photos of our child at all, because we just don't want them on
Yeah, you
our
mentioned that in the book, and I understand. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
you don't want anybody to say you're exploiting your child or a pedophile or doing anything. Yeah,
right, which can be used. Again, if
yeah,
there's an innocent photo that I take of a bath time photo of my child, but if a police or prosecutor sees that and says, "Oh, no, no, that's with some sexual intent because I'm queer," right? And there's all the stereotypes about queer people being harmful to children. That's where this comes in. Then that can lead to very real charges against me. And my mom the other day like sent me a bath time photo when she was looking after my kiddo, and she's just a prime example. Older straight white woman who was like, "Oh, this is so cute," and I immediately deleted it. Immediately, I was like,
yeah.
"I really hope this is no record of this anywhere on my phone."
Yeah, I understand. And for younger people who don't remember how it was in the 80s and 90s when there was so much fear for gay people when we were teachers or working in caretaking or of any kind and always worried. I mean, I have a funny essay that I've written when I was teaching young children in Spain. I was teaching them English, and the little boy, 5 years old, suddenly, when I was doing body parts, started yelling about his penis in Spanish and dropped his pants and jumped on the table. And I'm thinking, okay, this is the scariest thing for any gay man to have a naked boy
Yeah.
yelling penis at the at the top of his lungs. And his mom, of course, just comes in and she's like, "Cállate, siéntate," and like he sits down. But it freaked me out. I was like, this is the scariest thing for any gay man. And those kinds of innocent moments can turn into something.
Right?
Yeah.
Right, like questioning of the little kid. Why did you do that? Was that because of your teacher? What it Yes.
Right. Right. So, you also mentioned the trap of false confessions. You mentioned just recently, like, not to talk to
Police.
police officers and
Yeah.
to people until you have a lawyer. Um, so, why do you think women and queer people in particular are more vulnerable in those cases? When you talk in the book quite a bit about the police pressure and these ways of getting confessions. What is going on there?
Well, experienced police detectives will tell you, if they're honest, that they can make anyone confess. And I believe that. I believe that at the end of the day, I would confess under certain pressure as well. So there are tactics that police in the US are able to use that they can't use in other countries. They can lie to you. They can
Mhm.
present false evidence to you. They can say, oh, the doctor has said 100% you must have been involved somehow. And they also maximize whatever you say. So if you're like, oh, I feel so bad about what has happened. This is so horrible. That can be interpreted as a confession. So again, whatever you say is going to be twisted around and weaponized. And for queer people and for women, and particularly, if there's been a dynamic where folks have to protect themselves by trying to appease police, by trying to appease someone who is in a dominant situation, that's the worst mindset to go into that with, because you're like, "Oh, okay, what can I say to make this person happy? What can I Oh, okay, yes. Well, sure, yeah, I guess I was, the only person who was with the child at that time," right? Like, just giving this additional information that then again is used against you and means you're particularly vulnerable. And police will also weaponize your own trauma against you. So if
Right.
you're coming out of something traumatic that has just happened, that's when a number of police will interview you right in that moment. They think it's important to interview in that moment. And it doesn't
Mhm.
matter that you're experiencing trauma, which can impact your response.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point, that you might be in an emotionally fragile state, and so another reason why you shouldn't be talking. Um, you also talk a lot about the junk science and queer bodies and how these, like, old, like, kind of witch trial logic is still being used against people. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So junk science is a major problem in a lot of these prosecutions. And the first chapter of Pink Crime goes through, how do these wrongful convictions happen? How do these no crime convictions happen? And the reason I start with no crime convictions is, if someone can be convicted where no crime occurred, how'd the prosecutor convince a jury? How? So if
Mhm.
someone can be convicted in that situation, that's the hardest, highest burden, hurdle for a prosecutor. So what tools are they using? What techniques are they
Right.
using? And so I list those out in the first chapter. And one of them is faulty forensic evidence, bogus scientific evidence. Again, connecting the kind of pregnancy cases, if someone has a stillbirth, uh, police can take that, fetus to a medical examiner who can do what's called a floating lung test, which
Right.
is dates back to the time period of when we would drown witches, or drown people alleged to be witches, excuse me, to see if they were innocent or guilty. And if they were innocent, they would sink to the bottom and die. And if they were guilty, they would float in the water and we would murder them. So the floating lung test is, you take a piece of lung from this fetus, and if the piece of lung floats in water, that means that this was a baby that was born and took its first breath.
Right.
And then was murdered. Was
Right.
murdered. This is the evidence to show there was murder.
Right.
And sadly, it's completely unreliable, and it tends to have also false positives. So the lung is more likely to float. So the person is more likely to be, you know, to have
That's
this evidence
wild.
that they are a murderer. It is wild. But we see this in queer cases, queer sexual assault cases with bite marks, right? So longstanding tropes, again, that queer people, particularly lesbians, bite.
Mhm.
It's like a mind trip when you look how many wrongful convictions there are of queer people and queer women that are connected to bite marks. A bite mark's notoriously unreliable. I mean,
Right.
a bite mark expert is a dentist who's looking at a mark on the skin and is matching a dental mode. It's like, oh yeah, I think that's right. Total speculation.
Right. And that would be even in like intimate partner violence or
Hmm.
other accusations, right? You reminded me of the San Antonio Four. I remember that case, but I hadn't thought about it in a long time. And I was curious about one first, if you'd explain to people like how certain tropes against lesbians were used. I mean, there was the idea of almost like grooming, or like that the older lesbian was giving this child to the lesbians to then, take advantage of. But they were wrongfully imprisoned and then they were released and exonerated, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about that case in particular since it's an important one.
Yeah, and the San Antonio Four is also their case is a prime example of how important talking about these cases are, like how important media is, coverage is, because it was really because of a documentary about their case that they got a new um hearing, a post-conviction hearing, and then that their convictions were reversed. So it's so important for us to be talking about these cases. And these were 4 women, 4 lesbians, 3 of whom are Latina in the 1990s in San Antonio, who were all friends. And the paramour, no, I'm sorry, the excuse me, I'll take that back. The brother-in-law of one of the women was hitting on her, and she rejected him. She rejected him as a paramour. And his 2 children were 2 daughters that would be looked after by these 4 women, be looked after by the aunt. And so he coached them to make these allegations that they had been sexually abused by these 4 women. Like
Yeah.
he not just coached them, he threatened them, like actually threatened them. And when one of these women as an adult recanted, he then went to court to try to get custody of her children. I mean, very vindictive, um, very coercive. So they make these, these little kids make these allegations against their aunt that, as you said, their aunt was bringing in these other lesbians to harm all of them. And they're just
Yeah.
wild accusations. And they are reminiscent of the Satanic Panic, not just because that was in the 1980s, another instance of young children making false allegations because they've been coached, and
Yeah.
particularly against queer people. Uh, but also because one of the witnesses, the pediatrician, actually testifies that they think this is part of a satanic panic. They have notes that they thought this was a satanic ritual. Like they
Right.
thought these 4 women were performing some satanic ritual. So
Right.
the prosecutor leans into that and says, these girls were sacrificed on the altar of lust, and that the identity of these women as lesbians, that is the proof that they committed these offenses, that it's
Yeah.
because of their identity as lesbians, which, of course, again, is totally separate. Like, engaging in consensual adult relationships is completely different from harm against a child. And yet, we know as queer people that we have that conflated against us all the time.
It's just reminding me why, I'm Gen X and I've been told that I'm so traumatized by younger people. And I have to remind people this is one of the reasons because you hear these stories, you know these things happen. So you try to protect yourself by keeping your relationship secret, by not having these relationships, or, being very, very private and very selective of who you trust. But at the same time, you really go into the idea that visibility is really important,
Mm.
and also having these relationships and having support of your community and support of people who believe in you and love you. So, I mean, and these women also survived their incarceration because of their support. I'm assuming behind bars, so they kept supporting each other. Tell everyone about why you feel like we shouldn't be scared and keep all this private.
I think it's all the more important for us to be public now. And in part because one of the things I think that matters in this moment is when we have like a manosphere and we have people who just slander queer people, slander people in our community for no reason whatsoever. When we have the head of the Department of War, the highest levels of our government, just saying lies and
Yeah.
malicious things about our entire queer community, right? Um, that's when I think it's most important to call people out.
Yeah.
Because, for example, the woman who called the police on Pete Buttigieg, right? So she was able to be anonymous. She was able to make her complaint. But once the Washington Post reached out to her, she started saying, like, well, why are the police harassing me about this? And why am I being harassed? It's like,
Right.
oh, you're the snowflake. You're the one who, if someone says, why are you saying this? That doesn't seem right. I don't believe that they fold. And they're like, oh, oh.
Yeah.
So that I just think that the more we stand up and say something, then people are like, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't just willy-nilly.
Well, and then Pete was also raked over the coals saying he was making a bigger deal out of this than it was, and I'm like, if your kids are taken from you, it is a
Yep,
big deal to any
yep.
parent.
I was so proud of him that
Yeah.
he in that, he stood up and talked about that and publicly against what's one of the most powerful slanders against gay men, that you're abusing a young child, that you're a groomer. I mean, we see those lies, we see those groomer lies, and he stood up and said, "Yes, I have been investigated. I have been investigated by Child Protective Services," which is a humiliating thing, and it was
Mhm.
completely wrong, and I am not at fault.
Yeah,
That's really powerful.
it is. Um, so since Queer Love Project is a storytelling platform, I'm curious if you have any insights on how we as a community can use storytelling as a form of legal or cultural defense.
Yes. So, I definitely think of this as a defense attorney and, always talking with a client to find out what their identity is, whether the police documents are wrong about their identity, about their name, and what they want to be shared in the courtroom. Because if a client doesn't want their queer identity, trans identity shared in the courtroom, that's important to respect and also to prepare for the prosecution trying to bring it out anyways, right? So if you don't control the narrative, someone else is creating that narrative. That's why the
Right.
storytelling is so important, to know what narrative you are putting out there, because if you don't
Mhm.
do it, someone else will. And we see that all the time in the criminal legal system. So I really um, encourage folks to know what they want to present in court, and to be prepared to push back and to keep other stories out.
We have a good group of people that are following us live. So I just want to let them know that if they have any questions, you're not going to answer legal questions, but if you have any questions on these topics and you put them in the chat, we'll try to address them. One of the big things I wanted to ask you, I ask everybody how they define love, but in particular, I wanted to ask you in the sense of how does love transform from an emotion into a form of political and personal resistance, or can it?
Mm, absolutely. And again, I'll go back to Pride that we had last weekend. I'll go back to the Back Door, which is a queer bar that is so full of love, so full of joy that it overflows and that people are drawn to it and people are attracted to it. Even folks who might otherwise not know anyone who's queer, right? Might
Right.
be most susceptible to believing stereotypes and slander about queer people. There's so much love and joy and excitement that people are like, "Oh, what's that about?" And it draws people in. And I know, as like, as someone who cares about those protected spaces, like, it's important to have those spaces, particularly for queer people. And I think it's also that visibility and that excitement and that, again, visible love does matter for the messaging for the broader society that we are in, and also not being ashamed, being, again, proud of who we are, that we're going to share that, we're going to have fun with it. I mean,
Hmm.
being able to have fun with our identities and with our
Yeah.
community, and being playful, like,
Yeah.
being joyful. Yeah, so important.
Uh, are I'm curious if I mean, one of the other things you do mention we haven't talked about are and I believe in Indiana, you've had quite a bit of cases around drag queens
Yeah.
and drag queen story hour and all of that sort of stuff. And we haven't used the term because I really avoid using it, but this idea of gay people as groomers. Have you
Yep.
had to deal with any of those cases in particular?
So I only know about them, so I have not been involved in those cases. But Tennessee, right just south of us, is a key state where drag has been criminalized. One of the problems in a number of states, even if drag itself hasn't been criminalized, is, oh, well, you can't do a performance where children could see it. Let me tell you, this is also where resistance is important. So we have drag shows that are daytime drag shows where children can come and where my spouse and I make sure to go to those and support the queens, but also support, hey, this whole narrative that drag is harmful to children is wrong, is false. We are here. We are standing by this
Yeah.
community. Now, on the one hand, could that put us at higher risk? Like, oh, you're exposing your children to that. Potentially, but that's a risk that we want to take because it's
Right.
important to have that solidarity and that unity. So I encourage folks to actually go to those drag shows that can be all ages, that are children can go to them, to bring, people to drag story hours if there's drag story hours to show that there is a not just demand for this, but a need for this, an appreciation for it. And so my hometown is Fishers, Indiana, and their library board passed this ruling to remove all books from the teen section that had LGBTQ plus characters, right? And you know what? People spoke out. And the next time there was a meeting of the library board, people showed up. They're like, we want
Right.
this. And so the policy was reversed and those books were put back, which is particularly important when we know that, queer questioning youth, trans youth are at a higher risk of depression, higher risk of suicide. Like it's so important to see yourself in these books. So again, speaking out, again, I'm just so important about uh,
I'm glad you mentioned that too because I have family, my brother and niece and nephew, everybody live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Tennessee is always in the news these days. I have a lot of friends in Nashville as well, and when they've had those sort of bans and all the other controversy, I'm always like, you guys just need to do, like to help, donate, go out there, do this. I'm also trying to get my brother to get into local politics because we know that's where it also, starts because
mm,
he's a progressive person in a state that needs more people like that. Um, we do have a question about how to escape coercive control. And, this is sort of related to my final question. The person in particular says they're a mother of four. They don't want to get into it, but, earlier this week, I also spoke to somebody about IPVA, which is intimate partner violence and abuse. And we talked a little bit about that idea of the coercive control. For those who don't know what it is, could you explain? And if you do have any sort of advice for someone who's seeking or looking for help?
Um, so gender identity, also reproductive decisions can be used against someone who is in a relationship. It can be used by the partner against them, particularly in states where that behavior is criminalized. So the partner can say, "Oh, well, I will call the police on you." We have documented cases of these in Texas, for example. And again, if it's a situation where you're providing an opportunity for gender affirming care for your child, which runs the gamut of, voice lessons to therapy to medication. Like it's a whole spectrum when we talk about that kind of treatment, and yet that can be weaponized against a parent, against someone who's in a romantic relationship. In terms of what to do about it, I wish I had more advice documenting what's going on, documenting the threats that are made against you, documenting the control against you, uh, sharing that with someone who is trusted, and at the same time, not sharing information about m- seeking abortion health care or about seeking gender affirming care. Not sharing that information. I mean, folks, really, if you're in a state like Indiana, that's stuff that has to be private because it can be weaponized against you, not just by the police, but by people who are in relationship with you, tragically. So it's both of those things, I would say.
Are there people that are trained at like sexual assault hotlines that can also help in this kind of area?
So we do have one that I'm on the board of in Indiana. That's all options, and that's more about if you're being controlled in your reproductive decision making and are looking for a way to freely make your decisions and to escape again that kind of coercive control. In terms of resources for queer people, I am I'm I mean, Jerry, do you know of some that would be more natural?
No, I'm gonna do some research after this so I can find out, and if there's anything I can share in the notes when I send this out to everybody, I'll make sure to include that. But I do think that a lot of those resources is, we were talking about, I met you at a panel where we were talking about Hugh Ryan and how things have changed, and one of the things that has unfortunately changed in the last couple decades is because of LGBTQ people becoming more mainstream, a lot of those resources for queer people in particular have sort of become grouped into larger things or gone away or evaporated or the sort of mutual aid that used to exist has kind of disappeared.
Yeah, that is true. And I will say that in this moment in time, since January of 2025, in communities like mine, that's a small town in a dangerous dangerous state for queer people, there is growing mutual aid of us having signal chats, of us telling each other information about what's happening to someone, how to advocate
Right.
for someone else. Um, there actually is a growing community around that because it's necessary. It's so necessary when you know that the state power is being weaponized against you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've advised some people to get a Signal account and to communicate with people that way as well because it still
Yeah,
is a safe platform. Um, so I always like to end on a positive note, and I like to talk about, some sort of advice you might be able to give. And I was wondering if you have any advice on building a secure relationship when you're a wife and a mother, and people who are looking to build a deeply secure, resilient relationship. Is there anything out there that you tell people, or what would you tell us?
sure. My advice for myself, and this has been really important to my relationship, is that these outside pressures can be real. They can become real stress in a relationship. They really can. Even if we're not experiencing it directly, we're absorbing it and we're hearing things, and that can manifest in pettiness with our partner, small fights,
Hmm.
and it's so important, I think, for me and my partner to always come back to love, to know that at the base of our relationship, we are on the same team. We are
Right.
on the same team against all of this,
Yes.
okay? So we can have our fears and our frustrations and take them out in ways that may may not, be supportive of each other. And at the end of that argument, remember, we love each other, we are on the same team, and our love is so important to
Yes.
making it through all of this. I mean, really, like, this is just a lesson from decades and from queer elders, right? That there's gonna be the stigma, there's gonna be the attacks. And so it's so crucial to remember that your relationship is rooted in love.
So, one thing before I remind people about the Pink Crime book and that it's available at libraries and online and in your bookstore, or you can request it, um, is we talked about the Innocence Project. And I meant to ask you, could you just let people who don't know that this exists what it is and that it exists in different states?
Sure, sure, sure. So, innocence organizations investigate if people are wrongly convicted and are incarcerated, and then fight to find the evidence to prove their wrongful conviction and to get them out of prison. And we have innocence organizations in nearly every state. We have the Indiana Innocence Project here in my state, but I definitely encourage folks to reach out to them if they have a concern about someone who is incarcerated. And
Yeah,
that
no, it's a great organization.
and it's a little bit, broader in the sense of if there was, like, severe police misconduct that led to someone's, conviction, for example. So, yeah, there's a lot of ways the system can unfortunately, trap up people.
So, if people want to find you and support you, should they go to your website? And if so, can you tell people where to go?
Yes. So that's ValenaBeetyJD.com. I'm also on socials at Valena Beety Author, or just at Valena Beety. My day job is primarily that I am a law professor at Indiana University in Bloomington. You can find me that way, and then through my work with the Indiana Innocence Project.
So good. Anything that we haven't touched on that you wanted to make sure that we talked about?
Yes, because I thought of this while we were talking, that one of my favorite strategies of resistance is if you're at an event where there's, for example, the lieutenant governor of Indiana, who is a huge homophobe. My wife and I will just start kissing, and I love it. And then at a parade and someone's going by, we make sure that we do that because it's legal, it's love, it makes people feel awkward. It's great.
I love that you said that because the hetero privilege of kissing, I still get upset about. And for so long, PDA was something that I didn't allow myself and still have weird moments with, even in a city like New York or Boston. And when I was at Out Magazine, made it a point anytime I could show two same gender people kissing or two queer people in any sense doing anything affectionate or intimate, I would put it into the piece. I would make sure it was promoted because often it was called pornographic, even though it isn't. And it's still a political act. Kissing is a thing. And there's a reason why we used to have kiss-ins. Like, we need to have more queer kiss-ins.
We do. Agreed. Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, I think that's a really great way to end. And for anyone who might find this podcast on another platform and are not already a subscriber to the Queer Love Podcast or the Queer Love Project, you can find us at queerloveproject.substack.com, or just Google Queer Love Project. We're also on Instagram. And Valena, this has been amazing. Thanks so much for spending your afternoon with me.
Thank you. Delighted to be here. This was fun.
All right. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.